And we're live. If you open up the panelist block, you can see the attendees as they're coming in. Not the panelists, the attendees, the participants. Good morning, all. Welcome, welcome. My name is Ren. I'm your host today. We are joined by our lovely panelists. We'll meet them in a moment. But as you enter, you'll see in the chat, there's a little introduction that we're going to invite you to do. You could tell us your name, your organization affiliation, if you have one, and what plant would you be if you were in a garden?
Yeah, we're working late, treat the feel like it's a time shift. I was most launch for my one like a launcher. Now I'm the same way. Overtime, all the time, every night. But in my blessing, I'm ready. I wait. Never let a friend get in my.
All right, Beth, a succulent. A beet. Thank you, Sky. Oh, Teresa, I missed you. From Square Neighborhood Project, a rhubarb. Okra. Eddie, you'd be okra. Can you tell us why? Finnegan, you'd be a sticky monkey flower. Oh, yeah, basil. Kathy, a peach. Maria, a carnation. Yeah, not only are they beautiful, but they last for so long. Hi, Eddie, who is actually Grace. Okra, one of your favorite. Noel, a tomato. Oakland leaf in the house. Maroon, a giant dahlia with a ladybug. Yes. Love that. We're going to hold for 2 more minutes here. So we are actually listening to a soundtrack from Change the Tune. Charlie Kemp, we hope is able to join us, but this is music from her organization. Natalie, you're going to be a potato. Somebody told me that you could grow potatoes in a barrel, a potato barrel. I've always wanted to do that.
Highly recommend. It's endless fun.
It's endless fun. You just keep digging those potatoes out of the earth, out of that barrel.
You think you're done, but there are so many more potatoes left every time.
And
It's amazing. You can get these grow bags that are maybe $5 a piece. They're kind of like a really sturdy felt almost. And they're maybe 10 gallons. You can pop them on a porch even and ends up with 30, 40 potatoes. It's amazing.
All right, let's get our party started here. Welcome all. Happy Valentine's Day to all. I just learned this trick. Let's see if I can get it to work. It's not working. I did it. Come on, try it. Those of you, Noelle, you should be able to do it. Put it on something dark, solid. There you go. Oh my gosh, it's not working. All right. It sends out a whole bunch of hearts, but what are we going to do? Hi, all. I'm Ren, and we're here to talk about gardening in the after school program because, well, we know that research is telling us that young people's connection to the outdoors, nature, and earth contributes to their healthy development. And I'm here to say that that's also true for adults. So we're here to talk about gardening, raise some awareness about the impact it can have on young people's lives and how people in the after school can use those resources and get started. I'm really happy to be here with our esteemed panel. We have Noelle Nicholas. She's the Education Content Manager at Kids Gardening. Hello, Noelle. We have Sarah Brown, gardening teacher and coordinator at AP Giannini Middle School here in San Francisco, California, and Natalie Gustin Toland, an outdoor education and recreation specialist director at Real Options for City Kids here in San Francisco. So I'm going to invite each of the panelists to introduce themselves more fully. We are also hoping to be joined by Charlie Kemp. We know that she had an event prior to this webinar, so we'll keep our fingers crossed that Charlie can join us. So I'm going to start with Noelle. Welcome, Noelle. Could you tell us just a little bit about who you are? I'll stop sharing my screen because I know that you have something to share with us.
Yeah, absolutely. I put together just some slides. They always help me kind of organize my thoughts. It's such a pleasure to be here. My name is Noelle Nicholas. I'm the Educational Content Manager for Kids Gardening, as Ren said. I'm just going to introduce myself and our organization to you today, define a little bit of what I think after-school gardening can be and how broad of an idea that can be to fit everyone's programs anywhere. The benefits of gardening with kids as kids gardening sees it. Some tips and tricks that we have as garden educators from all over the country, and some of the resources that we have on our website that you can use to put it into practice wherever you are. So Kids Gardening is a national nonprofit that is based in Vermont, but we have staff members all over the country. I myself am based in Los Angeles, and we've existed for close to 40 years. About a little over 2/3 of that was as an arm of the National Gardening Association, more closely focused on creating like curriculum books and things for formal educators. But in 2014, we branched off as our own nonprofit to really expand the types of resources that we create for people. And we really just, our mission is that we believe every child should have the opportunity to learn and grow in the garden. So we try to make that happen by creating opportunities for kids to learn, by providing the educators who work with them and the caregivers who work with them with inspiration, know-how, educational resources that make it really easy to do. And we do several garden grants throughout the year, many of which include after-school programs as well as eligible. So if you're looking to start a new garden or revive an older garden, or just get some funding to do garden-related programming with your kids, you can check out our grants and see if you're eligible for those. I myself, as I said, am the educational content manager, so I kind of oversee our content every month. We're putting out new things every single month, and doing a lot of professional development opportunities like webinars and things as well throughout the year. A little over 10 years of informal education experience. I was in museum education for a really long time, in early childhood education and garden education. And I am a garden teacher at 3rd Street Elementary in Hancock Park, Los Angeles, where I work with a little over 500 kids from UTK through 5th grade. usually as entire classrooms coming for a lesson on Mondays. But I also hang out after school for an hour every Monday that I'm there and leave the garden open for our kids core kids to come in when they're finished with their homework and do sort of drop-in activities. And I also was a very proud after school kid my entire elementary school life. My parents both worked full time and I was in after school programs all the way till middle school. So I'm very, very fond of the work that you all do to be a part of kids' social lives and personal lives and academic lives. It's really, really fabulous. So defining after school gardening, I think I was asked by Temescal Associates to ponder this. And I really think that it can take so many shapes and forms. It's really just making space and time for growing with kids and letting them see that magic happen. So you can make space for growing in so many different ways. You can use containers. We kind of mentioned a little bit of the different types of containers for those potatoes just a few minutes ago, but you can grow them in grow bags. You can grow them in recycled containers. I have started so many things in like yogurt pint containers, in egg cartons, oh gosh, just really any recycled container, 5-gallon buckets from the hardware store. There's so many different things you can use to grow in. As long as you've got holes in the bottom for water to drain out, you can grow something in it. But there are also lots of really great containers that are produced by companies that are self-watering and really low maintenance. So if you've got maybe a space where you're teaching kids after school that is multi-use, maybe a cafeteria, other things, I think containers can be a really great place to start that sort of garden education because you can pick those up and move them and get them out of the way when you need to. You can get self-watering containers with, water reservoirs at the bottom. So you're not really thinking about having to keep those things alive every day. I know how busy it can get when you're working with lots of kids. Raised beds are also a great option if where you have your program has some extra outdoor space. There are so many tutorials online to get 2x4s from any hardware store. Ask the folks there to cut them for you exactly how you need them cut. Grab some screws and put that box together in about 10 to 15 minutes. Pop it on the ground outside, fill it with soil, and just get started that way. You can learn so much from your very first raised bed and, kind of make modifications from there based on what you learn about your area and how things grow there. But starting with just one raised bed is such a great place to start, and can kind of give you a nice big spot for kids to focus on and visit, afternoon after afternoon. In-ground gardening is an option for a lot of people if you have maybe a little patch of dirt next to the library on campus or a corner out on on the street corner that's outside of campus, or any little section. As long as it gets sun and as long as your soil is decent, you can amend that soil with compost on top of it, mulch on top of it, get some native plants in there that'll help you kind of break up your soil and get it into a place where you can plant things year after year. Vertical gardens are another option. If you've got some empty fence line, you can grab things like a shoe organizer and attach it to that fence and fill each of those pockets with soil and get things growing in there. We have a really great activity that leads you through that specifically that I'll pop in the chat in a little bit. Hydroponics can also be a really cool thing if you're in a place where you have maybe not so much sunshine during multiple months of the year, or it gets a little too cold to keep things growing outside. Getting a small unit that is $100, it will last you many years, and you can kind of bring it out for kids to maintain by filling with water and adding nutrients, thinking about the technology that goes along with that. But it can be really low maintenance once you get started. Just have something beautiful for kids to touch and smell if you've got basil in there, other herbs. So all of this to say is there's so many ways to grow with kids and a lot of things that can be adapted for an after school space. I also recommend, if you can't host a garden with where your program is and how it's set up, thinking about just doing take-home projects with kids. You're just sourcing those materials, doing something with them, and they get to take it home and have the gardening be at home with them. Seed Viewers is a really great one I'll share a link to, where you've just got a cup, paper towel, maybe a dry soup bean, and kids can watch that sprout. Egg carton planters, just cutting those egg carton cups into individual cups and having kids put a seed and soil into it and take it home and care for it from there. Making seed balls with wildflower seeds that they can throw into some, uncultivated, unloved places in their community and pass them day after day and see if they sprout is really, really fun and engaging. Making any kind of nature themed craft, the world is your oyster, but it makes them think of natural things as beautiful and fun and interesting. And lastly, I think that after school gardening can also look like beautification projects. If you've got, like I mentioned, that patch of dirt outside of the library on your campus and not a lot is going on there, maybe that's something that you and kids can maintain day after day. Depending on where you live, after school, 3 to 5 is a really great time to water and maintain your garden every day. So you are kind of in the perfect spot of the day to do a lot of that gardening work with kids. And picking things to plant together and take care of together is wonderful. We see the benefits of gardening with kids as all of these things. There are so many, but I think the main point of including gardening in your after school programming is to create opportunities for kids to connect with and care about nature. It's so important for them to develop those positive associations early in life. It gives them a sense of belonging to the natural world and a sense that they can seek it out and enjoy it throughout their life, and a responsibility for it. If they love nature, there's the possibility for a lifetime of sustainable choices, which benefits everyone. Their gross and fine motor skills get a lot of activity when they are doing things like taking a tiny seed and getting it into the right spot, or if they are using, those gross motor skills to lug an entire pail of water somewhere. So it's great for their physical development, their sensory development as well. All 5 of your senses, all 7 of your senses actually, can totally be engaged with plants and with gardening. I notice with my kids a lot too. I think this is one of the best things about it is personal responsibility and building resiliency with gardening. Gardening is experimentation. It's a wonderful place for them to try out caring for a living thing and being responsible for the success or the failure of its growth. And when failures happen, which they certainly will, it's a space for them to learn how to deal with an undesired outcome and how to grow their own resiliency, accept that outcome and persevere, try something new, try again. So I see a lot of growth with the kids I work with when we're gardening and things don't go exactly how we hope they will. They are ready to try again right away and really excited to try something new. Empathy building is another huge one. It's not just watching a tomato plant grow and picking that tomato and eating it. It is teaching kids that small creatures and growing plants are living things and they're worthy of respect and admiration. And while the well-being of one lady on that tomato, might not seem like the biggest deal, it can really become a benchmark, I think, from where kids learn to respect other human beings and understand that hurting a living thing or taking a life, no matter how small, is no small thing. And so they learn really to respect living things. And they get really curious about new foods. So I have a lot of kids who, will only want to eat something if they get to pick it. And so I have kids who hated tomatoes, but now they request them from their parents because the act of watching it ripen and anticipating it, seeing their other classmates pop one into their mouth and say yummy, it gets them more curious to try new foods. And I think that every child's dietary needs and preferences are very personal and they should stay that way. And I never force kids to try foods that they don't want to. And always ask about, allergies and things before you pick what plants, especially edible, to put in your garden. But I've just seen total changes in kids begging to come in and grab kale and sorrel and chives and eat them at lunchtime. And it's a really beautiful thing to see. It also encourages teamwork and sharing. I think gardening lends itself to helping kids work together and share materials simply by having a fixed amount of space and resources. There might be so many trowels, so many seeds. There's only space to plant so many plants. And so it has kids really learning to share and work together, because when they do, it means they get to participate no matter how small your garden is. And mixed ages after school, you've got lots of different grades and kids hanging out together. I think it's so cool I see this in my after school program. Kids learn to do things by modeling after the older kids that are already, you know, really good with those skills. Older kids learn how to look out for the younger kids and be a little more empathetic to them building their own skills. So seeing them work together is tips and tricks. There are so many. I think choosing projects that work for your needs. There might be an activity that you really want to do with your group of after school kids, but thinking through their age and ability levels, your budget, your available space, how much maintenance it would require, safety concerns, growing conditions in your area, thinking through all of that before deciding to move ahead with something really sets you up for success. And making sure your activities are geared towards equal access. I work with 500 kids, and I want all of those kids, if they're talking to each other at lunchtime, to know that they both got to do the same thing that month, and not that one classroom got to do something and another didn't, which is really, really hard. But I think when you think through how to make something available to all of the kids that you work with, it just really means a lot to them. That could mean that you do things rather than, you know, every kid gets to plant something in the garden. Maybe every kid gets to make a bag of seed balls and take them home. Every kid gets to explore the garden. You can also do collaborative gardening if you've got maybe 8 seedlings that you want to put in, and you've got, you know, 40 kids that are going to help you with that. You can get them into lines, have one kid dig the hole, have the next kid put compost in, have the next kid put the seedling in, the next kid cover it up, the next kid water it, et cetera, et cetera. And by doing that, you can have an entire classroom help with putting 4 plants in the ground. It's a really cool technique that we use. I think practicing culturally inclusive teaching in the garden is a really big tip. You can get your whole community involved, all of the parents involved, when you choose to plant culturally significant plants in the garden. Talking about geography, history, and culture with kids through this lens is so useful and so meaningful. Reading garden-themed books that mirror kids' own cultural heritage, but also gives them windows into learning about other cultures is fantastic. Putting garden signage in your garden that includes all of the languages that people in your community speak is really cool. And just really consciously showing thanks and exhibiting excitement when kids share their personal stories about plants and their traditions with you, with other names for plants. I think the garden just becomes a really beautiful place to make a more inclusive and loving world. Not every minute needs to be filled with a task either. You don't need to have a specific garden activity all the time. Just let them explore, especially if you've got a raised bed in April that is just bursting with stuff going on. Letting them have 30 minutes to just check it out, play, pretend, giving kids little figurines and letting the garden bed become a small world is really, really fun and doesn't require a whole lot. Giving them magnifying glasses so they can look really close can take up lots of time. And lastly, I think really being prepared to pivot. I'm sure everyone knows this, but the garden needs to be a place that's flexible. You might have an activity plan. It's super important to stop and talk about the grasshopper if they see a grasshopper and they really want to focus in on it. Things can always be tied back to what you were planning, but really mirroring their excitement about whatever it happens to be that day, even if it's unexpected, can really create those positive associations. And if you have allowed them to walk away with those, you have succeeded. And that is the whole point of including gardening in any programming. So to wrap it up, just putting it into practice, Kids Gardening has so many free resources that you can download and check out, a lot of information for getting started. I'm going to stop sharing my slides and just quickly hop over to just show you a little bit of our website. But I wanted to also give you my email. If you want to reach out for anything and have any questions, please feel free to write that down and reach out. Okay, let me get over here. All right. So kidsgardening.org is our website. And I just want to quickly show you that we've got, when you kind of make it a bigger window, we've got this navigation bar up at the top, which is how you can find everything that we've got. Learning tools is where all of our information lives. So we've got our activities, lesson plans. Digging deeper is our articles for adults who are looking for more information to explain a certain natural phenomenon to kids, maybe. And then this is just everything you would need if you're new to gardening and want to get started. We have growing guides for specific plants. So if you want to successfully grow carrots, we've got a guide for that. Everything you might need to consider. Lots of gardening basics, design elements. And there's so many. I can kind of let you see what it looks like if you head over to activities. We've got every activities sort of laid out here with what grades and what age levels it is really good for. If you were to click on, for example, making a pollinator water station, which is a great activity that requires very little materials and helps with that empathy building, thinking about pollinators. You just need a container, rocks, water, cuttings. All of our activities will give you an idea of how much time it takes, grade level, whether it's an indoor or outdoor activity, and what seasons it's great for. And you can download it as a printable PDF as well. The last thing I really wanted to show you, I guess second to last thing, I'll also say our opportunities tab is those grants that I talked about. If you're really interested in seeing what you're eligible for and applying for some funding from Kids Gardening, you can check that out through our opportunities tab and heading over to the grants section. We also have the Kids Garden community, which is looking really weird let me refresh that. This is something we started a few years back. It's kind of like social media for garden educators. It's free to join and it has tons of resource library, upcoming events. It has job postings, funding opportunities from other organizations besides ours, and discussion boards that you can start if you're looking for a specific type of curriculum, you have a problem and you're wanting some feedback. We have close to 1,300 garden educators all over the country that you can reach out to and get feedback from. So with that, I'll stop sharing. Thank you so much.
Wowza, what a wealth of information, resources. Thank you so much, Noelle. What an incredible thing. I wondered if you could tell us, with so much experience that you've had, can you talk about a transformation you saw in a child or a group of children through gardening?
Yeah, I'd be happy to. I have specifically, there was a little boy who was in second grade when I met him the first time, and he didn't have the best relationship with his teacher, I could tell, which is a really tricky situation sometimes if you're, on the informal side at a school. But he was really acting out a lot when we first met and being very just disruptive of our garden lesson. And it was sort of a thing where I could tell that this was an opportunity for him to enjoy learning outside of the traditional classroom setting. And so I acknowledged sort of everything that he brought out, but also when it came time for us to go into the garden, I didn't try to shepherd him so much into doing our activity and just really let him explore. I gave him a magnifying glass, and I think having that freedom, not being pushed to do what we were doing, and letting that garden just be a positive place to let out some energy, to be self-directed. By the next year, he was in third grade and he was with a different classroom that I think he just felt much more happy in. But I just remember thinking to myself, wow, the first garden class, he was shushing other students to listen. And so because he just couldn't wait to get in the garden because it had been a whole summer since we saw each other last. So I think really just letting the garden be there, any kid's happy place is the best thing you can do. It creates change and creates a safe place for them. And
Yeah.
yeah.
So lovely. Thank you so much. And when you have your kind of your hangout time from 4 to 5 or whatever it is on Mondays, typically how many kids come through? Like, what do you see? It's just like open garden time?
It is. And you
Yeah.
know, it's funny. Our kids corps at the school, they do have to finish their homework before they're allowed to roam campus. But depending on what time of the year it is and which grade levels, I tend to get the younger kids come in right away because they don't have homework yet or they've finished it already. And then the older kids will come in maybe 30 minutes later. And I'd say every Monday I get between 15 and 30 kids that'll come in and choose to be in the garden rather than, you know, playing on the basketball court or whatever it might be. And it changes who is there and who drags their friend to come see something or whatnot. But I have kind of a core of kids who come to the garden. That's their place they like to go after school. And I usually will leave out drop-in activities. Nature potions is the number one thing. They know that I have egg cartons. They know I have popsicle sticks. They know I'm okay with them grabbing herbs and stuff and smashing it and playing and making their potions. And they're always asking me to take herbs home for their parents, which I think is so cute because I'm like, they just want just the one chive that they want to give to their, or the one tiny sprig of rosemary. And I always imagine what can be done with that at home. But it's just that it's so beautiful. So I have always just like little paper, kind of like sandwich bags that I give out to them so they can harvest and take home whatever they want to and feel like it's their garden to harvest from and enjoy.
Thank you so much, Noelle. I can't wait to just dive into your website, actually, for myself.
Thank you.
All right. So all of you out there in Webland, please feel free to post any questions. We'll hear from the other folks here, and then we'll get to have a conversation with our beautiful gardeners. So Sarah from AP Giannini Middle School, would you mind telling us a little bit about yourself and your program?
Yeah, I'd love to. Let me go ahead and share my screen. I spend a lot of time in the garden, so technology is not my forte.
So you've got it's share your screen, and then you choose click on the screen that your document is on, and then hit share. That's the
Thank
thing.
you.
Yeah, you're welcome.
There we go. Okay. Sorry, just trying to make sure you can't see all of my things.
There you go.
Okay, cool. Yeah. So my name is Sarah, or you can also call me Teacher Sarah. That's what my students call me. And this is kind of the things that I was gonna talk about today. My position background, the benefits of gardening. There's so many challenges, tips, examples, and then resources and partners that I've found helpful. So I am a garden coordinator at AP Giannini Middle School in San Francisco with Bay Area Community Resources. Shout out my BACR people who are here right now. And I've worked in this position for 2.5 years now. And prior to that, I worked at an elementary school in the East Bay in Oakland for 2 years as well. Partially that was over Zoom, which was truly quite a wild experience to teach garden over Zoom, but really did learn a lot. And will say I used kids gardening as a resource a lot during that time. There are a lot of great activities that can be translated into many different formats. I taught both during the day as a garden teacher, and then I also worked for an after-school program as a garden teacher during that time too, and found the activities on that website truly very helpful for both. And then prior to working in garden education, and sometimes at the same time, I worked in other informal environmental education settings and have been working for about 8 years. And I'm currently also in a master's program for science education, where I'm focusing on how we can make garden programs as sustainable as possible in schools so that all students can have access to the natural world in a sustainable way. So that's a little bit about myself and my background. And then these are some pictures of our garden. We're really lucky at APG. We have about we have a 15,000 square foot garden. It's the biggest garden in San Francisco Unified. We have about 18 raised beds. We also have a flock of 4 chickens, which also makes all of this like an incredibly unique garden space. Also very large garden space. I was coming from before like I think my garden space in Oakland was closer to like maybe 3,000 square feet. Maybe it might have been a little bit smaller than that. So it was a big transition coming into this space, but also really cool. We also had like a greenhouse on site. We have a 3-bin composting system. All things that also like, I have to give a huge shout out to like the past garden coordinators. I think it's really cool the way at schools you can see things kind of like build on themselves, and owe a lot to like the garden teachers who came before me and put these systems in place. And I think it's a really great sign of how like we can lean on each other and support one another, which I think is one of the most important parts of gardening, is the community that it builds and can build for both the students and the staff. Which brings me to my benefits to youth and staff. So some of these come from like a practical standpoint, like what I have seen and witnessed, and then some of them come from research that I've done for my research project in my master's program about garden-based learning. So first of all, it's incredible, as Noelle was speaking about, like project-based learning opportunities. Students are cooking, they're building, they're doing science investigations, and they get to like spearhead them in a really beautiful way. We have a lunchtime club at our school that meets twice a week, garden club. And that's where you really get to see like students' interests, I feel like, thrive. Like we have raised beds, but they're pretty low to the ground, and we have chickens. And so our students were like, the chickens keep getting into our beds. What do we do about this problem? And so I challenged them to like make a plan, and they made a plan for how we can rebuild our beds. And now at this point, we're like at the point of implementing the plans where they get to build the beds taller, use power tools. They did all the measuring of the lumber, put in the requests and whatnot with me for the supplies they need. So I think that it's a really beautiful space for students to have the agency to dive into the projects they love or are interested in, and also to develop those problem-solving skills. I see a problem, how can I fix it? Especially for a developmental group like middle schoolers, which is such a transitional time, but is a lot about building those skills, and having those developmental opportunities can really lead to long-lived excitement about the garden and science in general, but also like confidence in their skills as well. Because middle school is a hard time, I will say. I remember from my middle school experience, it was not the best confidence building time. So anything that we can do to build on student skills and make them feel confident in themselves is really exciting to me. And then it also helps students, like, I think a lot, like Noelle was talking about, building patience and understanding for like themselves and others. Like gardening is not going to go the way you want it the first time around, or maybe even the second time around, sometimes not the third time around for like what you're planting. And I think that's a really great chance for students to learn adaptability. Also for staff to learn adaptability. That's things like I've had to come to terms with myself, or be like, I have planted carrots many times And every time something goes a little bit awry and you do the research and you plan it, but then the chickens get into the bed and you're like, oh no, they have dug up all the carrot seeds. What do I do now? And so it's acceptance that like things are not going to go to plan. And then you get to come back and figure out the problem solving. And it might take many, many tries to get to where you're trying to get. And you might not, at some point, for some things, you might not ever get there. Like there's certain plants that you might find just don't work in your garden space. But I think those are really important like skills for students to build, and for staff, and like just as people too. Patience is a really hard skill, but I think is also like a really beautiful skill and one that the garden space really fosters. And then like the research has shown, like access to outside space is really important for all of us. It helps our mental and physical health. There's like wild studies on that, where it's just like being able for a student to be able to look at a tree can help them with like focus, cognition, just being able to work harder at school. And so if students can be able to get outside and breathe the fresh air and touch a plant, then they're going to benefit so much more. And that every student deserves access to the outdoors and the natural world, not just for like science learning and identity and confidence, but just because this is the outdoors and the natural world are part of us. And so our students deserve that as well. It's part of the world that we're in. And a lot of students in like the cities don't always get access to that. God, oof. So those are some of the benefits to youth and staff that I think the garden programs can bring at your school. These are some more pictures of our students. This is from our summer program with the beans. This is one of our beds, actually. They were building a fence they were trialing a fence to try to keep the chickens out, because we use hay as our mulch in the beds, which the chickens really also enjoy. And so we were experimenting with ways that we could still use hay as a mulch, but also keep the chickens out. And then on the left, we have a picture of our straw flower bed, which was a really exciting project that some of our Garden Lunch Club spearheaded. They took the agency to like every lunch make sure that our starts were getting watered. They read the instructions really carefully to make sure that the sprouts would bloom, or if they weren't blooming, figured out why they weren't blooming. And then we like carefully transplanted all these together, and they watered them in and took care of them, which was really exciting because it meant that we could have like a cut flower bed through the whole summer, which was just a very sweet thing. I don't know if y'all have ever grown straw flowers before, but they are one of the coolest flowers because they dry like paper. And so you can like people make little earrings out of them. I actually have a little hanging of straw flowers right back there, and they'll last for a really long time. So they're a great one to do projects with in the garden, because like they'll last and the students can take them home and they don't have to worry about them wilting and things like that. And then from that, they can always save the seeds and replant them the next year, which is really cool. Yeah, challenges. So I think I've spoken a little bit to this already. Something that is a challenge that I've noticed in school gardens is access to resources makes how sustainable a garden program can be look really different. So especially in after school gardening, I think there's a great opportunity there because after school programs usually have a long established history with a school, have been there for many years. But it is really an important thing of like, if we're going to introduce some kind of green space or garden into our school, we want to make sure it lasts, right? We want to make sure that all students have access to this in the future. So think about how you can make this program long lasting. And I have some suggestions for that on the next slide as well. Acceptance, kind of like what I was talking about earlier, and patience is things are not going to go according to plan. There isn't like one way to garden or take care of a garden space. And there are lots of tips and resources out there, and like everything's going to look different depending what space you're in. and that is okay. I know for me, at least the first few years, that was like a troubling thing to accept, where I'd be like, it says that the carrots should be growing now, but the carrots are not growing now. I have done all the things. What could be going wrong? So I think accepting that that things will go wrong, and that is okay, but it can feel challenging at times, I know. And then staffing, it kind of goes into sustainability, but I think having somebody excited about running a garden program is beautiful. And sometimes that can be someone who's really excited, but isn't going to be able to stay past a couple of years or something like that. So how do you make sure that you have staffing continuously to maintain the garden? Also for care over things like summer breaks, or even like shorter breaks like winter and spring break, making sure that there are people there to care and manage the garden can always be a little challenging. There's things that I still struggle with too. I know, like over winter breaks, we have chickens, so we have to have them cared for. And sometimes I'll have to go in because like we didn't get as many volunteers as we needed to sign up. So like staffing, I think is an ongoing problem for maintaining any kind of green space anywhere, truly. These are my tips that hopefully will help you with any of these problems or challenges that you might face. So plant more than you think you need, always. Because like I said, I have harped on many times, things will go wrong. So plant more than you think you need. If you have a space like a greenhouse, this can feel a little bit easier because then you have backups. But you can also plant more than you need in like a garden bed. You can make little mini greenhouses. I'm sure there's like instructions for this on kids gardening, where you cut like little water bottles or milk cartons in half and can put them over plants. So you can use that if you don't have something like a greenhouse to start a bunch of seedlings, and then you can like separate them out more. And then something that I found was really helpful is I was like, I have so many ideas for the foods I want to grow, and so do our students. But make sure if you want to cook with the students that you have a plan for the food you grow. Because I think, first of all, this can make it feel a little bit less overwhelming when you get a bunch of fresh food that's like ready to harvest in the garden. You're like, okay, now I know it's time to make my like stir fry or fried rice or whatever it is. As opposed to, oh my gosh, now I have all this fresh food and I don't want it to go to waste, but I don't know what to do with it, which can be kind of an overwhelming feeling. You can also do other things with it. Like at our school, we started a free farm stand with our 8th grade program, one of our after school programs, which is a really cool leadership and mentorship opportunity. And so we'll give out like extra produce we have, extra eggs from the chickens, herbs. And then we also gave out seed packets too, to our community. And that was a really cool way to both engage the community and also help the 8th grade students build skills. And then also we tried to limit the amount of food waste we had as well. Also, it is a little bit, as a tip for me, I interact with like probably like 700 students. We have like a quite large middle school. And the idea of trying to cook for 700 students, I do it about 3 to 4 times a year, but trying to add extra projects in there, I'm like, oh no. So like, I think the free farm stand can be also a way that's a little bit less overwhelming to also get food to the community and connect with the community. If you're doing culturally inclusive foods like Noelle was talking about, you're getting people access to foods that they would normally cook with and go to the store to buy. And that's a really cool thing too. People will come back also with like recipes and things they can do with the foods, which is a really cool community building thing too. I'm like, sick, I would have never known. I remember like stir frying bok choy with my students, and they were like, oh no, this is how we do it at home and stuff like that. And so those are always really cool interactions to see. Oh wait, hold on. I clicked too many times. 1 second. There we go. And then something also that I learned, because sometimes I would feel a little overwhelmed, that I needed to plant everything from seed, because we had this really awesome greenhouse. And then things wouldn't work out or they would take a really long time, is that you don't need to plant everything from seed. It can feel a little hard to plant everything from seed, and certain things will be a lot easier to incorporate in your garden if you plant them a different way. Try to plant potato seeds, for example. Not going to be very fun. It will maybe take a long time and you might never see success. Planting a whole potato, like y'all were talking about, very fun and satisfying, also relatively cheap. Things also like alliums, like onions, green onions, or garlic are all great things to either like get from the nursery already started, or like garlic you can plant from cloves. And I think it's also a great point of like acceptance, where it's like buying things from the nursery or getting things donated from the nursery does not make you a bad gardener. It makes you a very practical gardener because you're trying to get as many things to your students as possible. And I think that was a really helpful thing that I learned from a gardening program that I took at Garden for the Environment, which shout out Garden for the Environment. If you're in San Francisco, I definitely recommend checking it out. And then this kind of goes along the line, I think, with a lot of the things I've been talking about, but like have grace and patience for yourself if you're trying to start a garden program. Like it's a hard thing to do. Or even if you're just trying to maintain one that already exists, like it's hard. Like you're trying to make living things grow and also take care of students at the same time. You're managing many living things. That's really hard. And if you're trying and you're getting some success, like you deserve a big pat on the back and probably a hug. And also, it's okay to ask for help. Something that I found was really helpful at my last job and now my current job is building a parent committee. So I have like a parent committee about 4 or 5 parents, and a lot of them have been with me since I started at this school. And they're people that I can lean on to like ask questions or ask support for like to help with support for like a specific project, or I can like delegate tasks to if I don't have the capacity to take them on. So it's totally okay to ask for help. Gardening should be, I think, a community effort, and we should be looking out for one another in it. And usually people are really happy to help a garden space at their school, like parents, but also, you know, science teachers, other staff that you might have. Even you can like ask students for things, like see if they would want to help with like volunteering on the weekends, put it out to them for like garden work days and things like that. And then also going back to the sustainability piece, start small. Your garden does not have to be giant from the get-go. Our garden at our school is very large, and also that can be really overwhelming. Just like a raised bed, or like some of the things that Noelle was talking about, like the shoe tree, like a hanging garden that you can put. You can put that also, some of those you could put in certain inside spaces too, which is really cool. Any ways that you can bring the natural world to your school is beautiful. And it doesn't have to be like a 15,000 square foot garden. Take on what you think you can manage, or maybe more what you know you can manage. Like if you know you can water a garden bed 3 times a week, like that's great. And that's a great start. And it doesn't have to be any bigger than that to start a garden. And then last thing that I would say, just like a very simple and practical thing, take care of your tools, man. Tools are expensive, hard to come by, and when they break unexpectedly, it can be really frustrating if you're working on projects. So make sure you keep them clean. Always make sure to scrub them down before you bring them into your tool shed. Take care of the wood on them. It'll break really quickly. And also make sure that you are helping your students take care of the tools too by giving them really specific guidelines and tool agreements. We have a whole tools lesson at the beginning of the year where we're like, this is how we use tools, and then we practice using tools. And some of it the students aren't a big fan of, but it does help us make our tools last a little bit longer. Yeah, and these are just some of the resources I've found are really helpful for gardening. Golden Gate Gardening is an excellent gardening resource. It's written by Pam Pierce, who's a local gardener here, I believe in San Francisco. It's mostly helpful for people in the Bay Area, but I think you can probably find other gardening books, like comprehensive gardening books for different regions. I don't know them off the top of my head. If you are interested in any research articles, I have access to many of those that show the significance of garden-based learning to students, science identities, community development, things like that. And then for websites, so School Garden Support Organization is put on by, is just truly a website for school gardeners to support one another. I think it's put together by Life Lab, which is a school garden program down in Santa Cruz. It's really great. The one thing caveat that I would say is sometimes it can be hard to pull up on district Wi-Fi, but it is a really great forum to kind of post questions in, and then you can get answers to. The Edible Schoolyard Project also has a great great resources for curriculum. And kind of basics for getting a garden up and running. And then also kids gardening, I found, like I said earlier, is a really great resource. I just put the link for how to start a garden, but like I said, I've used many of their lessons and implemented ideas from many of their lesson plans into my curriculum. In terms of partnerships that I've found helpful, so nurseries all across the country after the at the end of the year, they have to get rid of all their seeds. So you can get last year's seeds donated to you for free, which is amazing. And the seeds usually are still good. I haven't had any problems with them sprouting. They just can't sell them past their expiration date. So we get ours from like Sloat Nursery, but you can ask most nurseries around the country. I know at my old school, the garden teacher got some really cool heirlooms donated from I think nurseries in the Midwest. Other partners, like I said, community gardens will oftentimes have extra plants they need to get rid of. I've gotten a lot of plants from the community garden I volunteer at in the city, Garden for the Environment, which is a great resource. I didn't write them down specifically, but if you have any questions about them or would like to contact them, feel free to reach out to me. And also like native plants gardens too. We have a big native plants garden in our inside of our garden. And we got a lot of those plants from donations from like the California Native Plant Society and Golden Gate Parks Conservancy, who also has their own native plant nursery. And then parents. Parents are a great resource. This one I want to put a caveat on. Like, it totally depends on your school site, what parents will be available to do. Like, we have a pretty robust PTA and also parents with more time on their hands. But usually parents are willing to help in some way. You just have to like see what parents are down to help with. Are they more able to support with like a garden work day and come in and do some planting or weeding? Or maybe they're able to support like with resources and donating compost and mulch or support financially. So just getting a feel for what parents are capable of at your school is a really great way. And like I said, I find it's really helpful to have a parent team or committee if you both have the capacity to manage that, and if your parents do as well. It's been a really great support system for me. And then environmental nonprofit organizations. We've partnered with a bunch of them. There's ones that can help you start compost systems in your garden or maintain them. There's ones that can install water catchment systems. We are partnering with the Watershed Stewards right now, and they many years ago installed a water catchment system on the roof of our chicken coop. Additionally, nonprofit organizations like native plant societies can be great as well. We're partnering also with the Department of Environment right now to get more compost into our community. So there's many opportunities for partnerships. And if you are in the Bay Area and are interested in any of the things I named, please reach out to me about them. Always want to help other gardeners get set up with those things. Yeah, that is all. If you have any questions, please feel free to contact me about any of those resources listed, or questions about leading a garden program in after school at all. I'm happy to share resources or not commiserate. I love my job very, very much, but there can be hard bits about it. Yeah, thank y'all so much for listening.
Thank you so much, Sarah. What an incredible opportunity you have there. You know, I had a question for you and also the other folks on the panel. There's a lot, you talk a lot about project-based learning, and I'm just curious to know, as Sarah, especially for you, is there a master plan that you have for the garden, or does that emerge from what the young people are interested in?
I don't have like a master plan for the garden. What I try to do is I have my curriculum that I developed to kind of go with the seasons. And then we have our kind of already established areas of the garden. Like I said, we have a native plants garden, and then we have our raised beds, and we have like our chicken coop. So I really try to have students be like direct themselves at the beginning of the year to think about projects they want to see in the garden. We do like little garden tours, and like a lot of times my students, especially in garden club, will ask really good questions and be like, we had like 2 trees that are the same in our native plant section. Like they're the same kind of tree and they're the same age, and one looked a lot less healthy than the other. And so students were curious about that. And so I try to go with what students are curious about, and we figured out that it might be a good idea to do some like soil testing. And so now we're running with that as a project of sampling the soil and figuring out like if there's anything wrong with the soil. So I don't really have a master plan. I do try to stick to like doing like certain garden tasks at certain times. And I always try to have a plan for the next season of like what we're going to plant. So we make sure that that's kind of our baseline. It's like we know what we're going to plant in each garden bed. And sometimes that changes a little bit, but just having a rough outline. That's kind of the extent of like really formal planning that we're doing in the garden.
Thank you. I want to welcome in Charlie Kemp. Yay, Charlie. Thank you so much for joining us. Noelle or Natalie, did you want to chime in on that question? Do you have a master plan, or does it emerge from the young people you're working with?
I can just pop in and share a slightly different perspective. So our program has 3 different schools we work at, and those gardens are very dependent on what's going on at the school community. So sometimes, you have teachers who are highly invested in the garden, or, there's other plans that are going on in the garden, even if you're using those in your after school program as an educational space. So I would say it's very much in collaboration with each school community, how we move about making plans for the garden. And I would say we rely heavily on a curriculum that is not necessarily tied to whether or not we have the ability to do planting in the space. It's just can take place in the garden. So it's very applicable to a myriad of situations on school campuses.
Thank you. All righty. So now we're going to hear from Natalie. And Natalie, same deal here. Please introduce yourself and your organization, and I will share the slides for you.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Hi, everyone. I'm Natalie Gostin-Toland, and for over 5 years, I have worked with Real Options for City Kids, or ROC for short, which is located in San Francisco's Visitation Valley neighborhood. And we work with this neighborhood community and their public schools in order to provide well-rounded basic support services for students and their families, while also focusing on broadening community horizons. I'm the director of outdoor education and recreation with Rock, and we provide a variety of programs aimed at connecting the community to nature and removing barriers of access to local natural areas. One of these programs includes our weekly Nature Scouts program, which provides high-quality outdoor education, science, and gardening classes to students during their after-school programs. And like I said, this takes place across 3 campuses in the Visitation Valley neighborhood of San Francisco. Next slide. Here we have some photos of our kids working in the garden. Specifically, this is our middle school campus. So those are all middle schoolers. That's our largest garden. And we do have a beehive, which is super fun. And here's our Nature Scouts. We got some kiddos. I forget what that is. I think it's a very old cabbage, very bug-ridden cabbage. That one was left just to see how big we could get it. One thing to note is that we do work on these school gardens. Either we are planting in them or we are hosting classes inside them and, you know, helping to maintain the gardens as a part of our curriculum. But we also venture out into the community. We do take a lot of field trips to local natural spaces such as parks and community gardens. And additionally, we also do some fun weekend programming where we will visit slightly further out destinations, such as we're going to Slide Ranch this year, which is a really wonderful garden farm right on the beach. So it's a really great full day adventure for students to just kind of explore how a working farm and garden kind of operates. All right, next slide. So I think that our other presenters have shared so much good nuggets of wisdom about all the joys and the benefits of gardens and students. And I think especially in an after-school setting, the benefits are so numerous. Not only do students benefit from increased positive mental health outcomes by spending time in the community and in the outdoors, but I think students also have a unique opportunity to develop new skills. And especially if you're working in a school garden specifically, they're also building a lot of pride in their school campuses. A lot of schools, especially, you know, in urban settings, lack substantial green spaces or the resources to maintain these spaces. So by providing students with skills and resources to care for campus green spaces, you not only benefit the individual students, but also the greater community. Cared for and thriving campus green spaces and gardens can have such lasting positive impacts on the health of the community. And also they can boost things like school and after-school program enrollment. So if you're trying to convince an after-school program coordinator why you should host a garden program, that's a really great fun fact to share. And like the other presenters mentioned, these spaces can also be really powerful tools for instilling student agency and leadership opportunities. I once worked in a school garden, and it was just a patch of blacktop to start. So we were building it from the ground up. And this was such a wonderful opportunity to engage students in the development of the space. We had a class where we studied the sun's movement across the schoolyard and workshopped together where we should put planters. Students were able to design their own maps of the space, featuring choices on what types of planting vessels to use and what types of plants to grow in them based on the amount of sun in different spots in the garden, and you know, figuring out where exactly to place each planting vessel. And students having agency over the space like that can instill such a sense of ownership and dedication to spaces like gardens that can be really powerful, especially for new garden spaces. And then lastly, I would say school and community gardens during after-school programs where you already have families coming to you for pickup. In most cases, it's such a powerful tool for building cultural connections and inclusivity in your programs. Gardens provide spaces for shared multi-generational leadership. And growing food can be such a great way to bring connections around cultural traditions, stories, and knowledge, and bringing families into the picture for, diverse learning experiences for your community can be all centered around gardening and food growth in your gardens. Next slide. So if you are thinking about starting your own gardening program or project, I think something everyone touched on was considering your space. Sarah, your garden looks absolutely epic. And I'm sure a lot of, school gardeners have a lot of garden envy. Chickens, oh my gosh, that's a dream. A lot of school campuses, though, may have existing gardens. They might be, they're not that large because that is the largest one in San Francisco, but they might be a little smaller or even just blacktop. So you might be starting from scratch. So first things first, if you're an after-school program that runs on a school campus, checking in with admin around who's who with the gardening. There's usually one point person or a few point people on campus who are particularly invested in the space. That's been the case in all the school gardens I've worked at. And, you can just check in with those folks, like ask, is there a raised bed or some sort of vessel you can use? And that's not always the case. And if that's what the, status of the school garden that you're working on is, you can also just use that space as an outdoor classroom and, let teachers know like you're happy to help do garden maintenance job. And that's something you can weave into your curriculum and still be a part of that space. And if you're not hosted on a school campus, which not all after-school programs are on school campuses, you can get creative about the spaces you can use. I think Noel had so many really great detailed different ways you can plant that are outside of the norm of, a typical garden space. So connect with your organization to see if there's budget, if it's blacktop, add a wine barrel, or those troughs are really good. Those like feed troughs. They sell them at Home Depot. They're pretty easy to get. And also keeping your eyes peeled for free resources. Always advised. I've gotten a lot of free stuff over my years just by, keeping an eye on different networks. And then reaching out to local businesses for donations is always worth a shot. I've had a lot of luck that way. And, once again, I think like Sarah mentioned, finding a community garden near you is also a really great option, especially if you don't have that physical space. Check in with them. Do they have an extra plot or a raised bed? Some sort of way that you can connect your students to green spaces. And then, there's tons of grants available for garden spaces, especially ones connected to school campuses. And it sounds like Kids Gardening has a lot of really great resources there. Also, another one I've used a lot is Whole Kids. They provide a really nice, substantial grant for starting and maintaining green spaces on school campuses. Next slide. Thank you. So like I said, yeah, grants really, really just do a quick Google search. Same with curriculum. If you're brand new and you're like, I want to do a gardening thing, but there's just, there's a lot of information out there. There's a lot of like pre-made curriculums that exist out there. I know, Sarah, I think you mentioned Life Lab. Life Lab has great curriculum on there. I think it came from the Late Education Outside nonprofit. And then it looks like Kids Gardening has some really epic curriculum on there. Shout out to Kids Gardening. But beyond that, I would say we rely really heavily. We're a community organization. We're very embedded in the Viz Valley community. And I would say we really highly rely on reaching out into the community to see, what's around resource-wise for us. So, reaching out to local organizations, we partner with a lot of those organizations that you also mentioned, Sarah, also located in San Francisco. And, community groups, you also have, families of students. I think if you have a PTA, that's really great. None of our schools have a PTA, but we can just find just like even one community member who's invested can give you so much knowledge about, the space they can volunteer. And then, yeah, even neighborhood gardeners, if you see someone in the neighborhood near your school who's like out gardening, I have walked up to people and been like, hey, that's a great garden. We have a school garden on the campus. Boom, you got a new connection. So many communities have just a wealth of knowledge and resources that is really opened up through making connections like that. Right.
Thank you so much, Natalie. So I know this is a gardening webinar, but we also have chicken and bees. I'm just curious to know, you said you have 4, but do they make more every year, Sarah?
Oh, no, we just have 4 hens. So we don't have any roosters specifically for that reason. We just did our chicken lesson the other day, or started our chicken unit, and students were like, yes, why don't we always have more baby chickens? And I was like, great question.
And Natalie, the bees, are the young people involved in beekeeping?
Yeah, so we actually work with an organization that comes in to help maintain our beehives. I believe it's Planet Bee Foundation. And they come in about once a year, just to kind of do an overall checkup on the beehives as well as harvest the honey. So you saw in one of those pictures, we had a kid all suited up, smoking the bees so they get relaxed. And then they actually, they take the honey out and all the kids get to sample the honey during lunchtime. It is quite an occasion every year.
No doubt. No doubt. Thank you so much.
I will also jump in and just shout out vermicomposting. We have a Sub Pod unit in our garden, which is a brand called Sub Pod. It's Australian made, and they are essentially worm bins that are in ground. So the worms can go in and out of them into the soil in your bed. And you just open the top, throw in your food scraps, close it. But it's great because other things can't really get in ventilated, but just barely. And kids constantly begging to see the worms, check on the worms, give their baby carrot that fell off the, cafeteria table onto the floor to the worm. It's really sweet.
Thank you. And Charlie Kemp from Change the Tune. Welcome, Charlie. This morning, I was playing music from your website. And I was curious to know, is that music that the young people made? Is that a compilation of the music young people made, or one you put together? You don't know what I'm talking
That one
about.
is theirs. I know we have a playlist on there. We usually in our garden use their playlist when we're doing things. So I'm sure most of the songs came from them at some point in time, but that one is probably curated a little extra special for the website.
So Charlie, want to give you an opportunity to tell us about your work. And if you wouldn't mind, tell us a little bit about yourself and your organization. And I know you have something to share with us.
Sure. I will share a deck in a minute. First of all, thank you for having me today. Excited to be on. I apologize. I was late. I had another prior engagement I'm coming from, and so I may duplicate a little bit of what some people have said. My apologies in advance. Just about me. So I call myself Chief Revolutionary Officer, Executive Director, if we want to be politically correct, founder of Change the Tune. Um, I am born and raised in Los Angeles, did college in Atlanta at Spelman, did Teach for America in New York City, taught middle school math for 5 years. We've talked a little bit about middle schoolers on here. I like to say middle schoolers will humble you, and so you have to think about ways in which they will humble you a little less. And the garden can be one of those powerful tools. After I taught for 5 years, I came back home, got my MBA from USC. I did finance and operations for Green Dot Public Schools and did a lot around the school nutrition program and the operations side, and learned that some of our school vendors, food vendors, actually serve prisons, which is not problematic because all people deserve food, but the problem is that the quality of the food across the board is terrible. which has really kind of spanned this concept of food justice. We had kids in some of our places and spaces protesting the lunch food and saying they wouldn't eat. And we know that when kids don't eat, as a teacher, I've experienced when kids don't eat, they don't show up as when no one eats, like being hangry is a real thing, you know. We need our bodies to be able to function properly, which has kind of led me into this world where I began starting after school, and I'll talk a little bit why after school is so critical. And I know that you guys probably talked about some of the things, but I have a few numbers that I'll share with you all. Wanted to do more, and that didn't present itself at Green Dot. So I left, got my doctorate at Harvard, and really thought about how do we change the entire ecosystem. If we turn on the news, I don't care who you are, no one is happy when we turn on the news at this moment. And so understanding how do we ground ourselves literally and figuratively has led me into this work. And so finished the doctorate, and now we run Change the Tune. We have after school program in Los Angeles, and then we run summer camps in Los Angeles, Chicago, and the Bahamas the past 3 years. Our summer camps, we usually do things like aquaponic systems. We don't do a full garden because we might be on a college campus and their rules and regulations are a little harder. But in the after school program, which is what we're actually starting to branch out and do a little bit more, is where we are. I'm gonna show, I'll try and keep it to about 7-8 minutes. I didn't press share sound. So make me sweat, make me harder, make me lose my breath, make me. So I started with that song. We use music as a tool to connect us all. If the participants, this wasn't webinar style, I might ask you all, what are you all listening to, and have everyone drop it in the chat. But for those who are on, you can drop it in the chat what you're listening to, and if you have a garden song, would love for you to share. This video shares a little bit about our work and how we think about the work at Change the Tune. Uh-oh. Imagine your most amazing, fun learning experience. Pull up in motorcades. I got a show today. It's all I'm trying to do. Hustle and motivate. Education is supposed to be the great American dream and a meritocracy, but that's not true. And so it actually causes the inequity that we see. It perpetuates the opportunity gap. Wealthy children get about 4 years of extra learning time by the 6th grade over lower income children. Education's the answer or the beginning to start to fix problems because you don't know what you don't know. Education has never been revamped to support Black students, non-white students, poor students. Change the Tune is thinking about the after-school space, the summer space. It's thinking about these extended learning opportunities in terms of how do we support parents in creating the bridge. The way that we approach students with special needs is actually the way that we should approach all students. Everyone learns differently. No one should be penalized for it, and teachers should be flexible. It's really about understanding not just academics, but even the holistic needs. Mindfulness, breathing, identifying the feelings that we're feeling and actually being able to work through those feelings. And so with Change the Tune, we have a multidisciplinary, multi-pronged approach that really works to revolutionize what learning can look like in the outside of school space. That's the difference maker, is it's not also just, here's a box curriculum, now go do it. It's actually, we do coaching, we support, we make sure that they have what they need. I'm gonna stop that there and come back to our deck here. I want to hone in on this piece, why after school. This piece that kids spend 80% of their waking hours outside of school is huge. And so when we think about where to do gardening, what to do with kids, like this is the difference maker. You can be so creative. And then when we think about it from an equity perspective as well, the most people who recognize learning doesn't end at 3 p.m. It doesn't end in June. Like learning needs to happen everywhere. So one of my favorite stories I like to tell, we had a learner in our program. He went home, he was doing gardening with us. He told his pastor at church what he was doing, and the pastor was like, we're going to start a church garden.
So how many people can that transform from that? And so when you plant seeds in school garden programs, like it's like almost like wildflowers. They go and we don't even know how far they can go to. Um, this is what 6,000 hours looks like. And so this is why a big portion is after school, a big portion is summer. And like, how do we use these spaces to be able to do project-based learning, hands-on learning, things we all know that the soil and the way the soil feels and what we can do with it. And then one of the things that's unique is we don't just create the food and harvest it, they actually cook in our program as well. And so they might make a mint lemonade or butternut squash soup, or the goal is for them to be able to actually eat and make meals with what we've grown and cultivated. We know about Maslow's hierarchy of needs. And so I think the garden taps into this on multiple levels. One, it allows people to see themselves. We ask our kids, what do you want to grow? Like, I don't just say, okay, we're going to make this. We do have to give them confines. So I am not a gardener. Let me make that very clear. I'm not a gardener. I worked with really powerful gardeners, and I have the vision and they've shown me things, but I work with those and they teach me this is not the season for that. So we're not having strawberries right now. And so teaching kids the life cycles, it's really be important. And then this idea around not just around self-actualization, but cultural perpetuity. I'm not gonna continue on the deck because I want to create time for space and I know we're limited in time. But I think the last piece I will just amplify is this piece right here where so Plant Plug LA is our main gardener at home in Los Angeles. She leads a lot of the work, and we've actually worked with Crop Swap LA. We've worked with a number of gardening partners, and our belief is also like not doing this work in silos. That's one of the challenges in the education system, is that people operate in silos. And so even families, when families get to come in and garden with our kids, it's really powerful. There's no specific right mode of work. My Plant Plug loves to grow from seed, and I'm like, kids need to see something. Let's get seedlings. So we do both. We do seeds and seedlings. We have pots. We do the raised garden beds. It's really about talking to the community and what they need and what they want and co-constructing with them. So that's a little bit about us and our work. And I think the goal is we are building the future leaders. And so if we think about our current food model, America is ghetto when we talk about the food model and what we've done to food. And so we want to teach kids, like, how do you create your own fresh, sustainable food? And gardening is a practice to be able to do so. So thanks, guys.
Thank you so much, Dr. Kemp. I think you said this, but I missed it. How long has the program been in existence?
Change the Tune was founded in 2017. Our first learning program happened in the summer in 2018, and we've been doing gardens since about 2021.
And how are you seeing the connection between what you're doing after school, how that's impacting in school?
Yeah, I think there's a couple of things. I think one is, I can actually remember one day a parent was like, yeah, he's not going to school, but he'll be there in after school. And I was like, I don't know if that's exactly what we're going for here. But it does help with getting kids to come, period, to school. One of the things I think she said on the video a little bit is making meaning for what we learn in school. A lot of times teachers are not equipped or have the capacity to understand, why does this math matter? I saw a video the other day, or no, it was a meme. It said, when I was in school, I learned about a rhombus. I've never talked about the rhombus ever since. Like, but the garden, you can look at science and you can understand the scientific method with the garden. And so we're able to like reinforce concepts that are learned in the school space, in the after school space. But bigger than the academic is the non-cognitive. How do you talk to each other? There's a saying in the kids world, talk to me nice. Like, it's a space to be able to teach each other, talk to each other nice. How do you work with someone in projects? A lot of times teachers don't have the capacity to do projects because then they have to talk to each other, and that's a whole nother set of time that you can't deal with. But being able to teach kids how to do these things together, then that's the piece, is the non-cognitive skills, communicating, creativity, critical thinking, collaboration. That's the power that then gets even more amplified in the school day.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So Maria says she loves your music intro, Water by Tyla. She listens to that song a lot because of her kids. So I would love to open it up to folks in the out in webinar land. Do you have any questions or comments that you would like to engage our panelists in? And panelists, I'll ask you if you have any questions or comments for each other.
I have a question for you, Noelle. It seems like you have so many incredible ideas for curriculum that you've developed. I'm curious how long you've been working as a garden teacher at your site.
It's been 2 years. I also volunteered for a short time over 10 years ago. I'm originally from Honolulu, and I worked with an organization called Aina in schools for 1 year. And that was sort of my first dabble into garden education. And so a friend of mine asked me to think about taking over the garden program at her child's school in 2021 because it was post-COVID. The garden had completely gone wild and a lot of things needed to be revamped, but also they were working with Enrich LA previously, which is a nonprofit in LA that does entire, school year long curriculums for kids, and they had missed the deadline to sign up with them. So they asked if this one informal educator who's a friend of a mom on the PTA would maybe think about doing anything in the garden because they didn't want a whole school year to go by without anything happening in the garden. And so I started this before working for Kids Gardening. I've only been with Kids Gardening a year and a half. And I was actually using the website's resources myself as well to find things to do and to put together a seasonal curriculum that could serve 500 kids. And figuring out how to fit that in with my full-time job I had at the time at the Natural History Museum. It was kind of a really crazy experience that happened out of chance. But the kids taught me a lot about what works and what doesn't work. I came in with some really basic things like plant needs, pollination, basic beautification projects that we did together around the campus. And from there, I just sort of, things worked, things didn't work. I thought on my feet. But I think there's so many resources out there in kids gardening now that I work for them, was one for me. So I think it's really just what gets you excited, talking to your inner child. And if you were coming and sitting down on a table and being presented with something, is it exciting? Is it interesting? Does it make you feel that kind of joy? Was where I came from putting together a curriculum. But really similar to you, Sarah, I'd say it was sort of seasonal. I was seeing every classroom once every 1.5 to 2 months. So the next time they came to the garden for a whole hour, it was like it's a totally different scene in the garden. So really thinking through what was going to be happening in the garden during that time period was something I leaned on more experienced gardeners for. I experienced gardener. So figuring out what our planting dates in LA looked like, what was going to be happening during the school year was all a huge research project for me at first. And then you just kind of get to know your garden. You get to know the attention span levels for each grade level and kind of scaling things up and down once you have gone through a successful or a not so successful, really, really wily lesson, which is always changes with every kid too. I think just, yeah, really relying on online resources, figuring out what brings you joy will probably bring those kids, and then just being really flexible, listening to them. If you can tell they're not into something, you can kind of ask them questions and modify your lesson moving forward. And this is also very kind of, I wanted to jump in about the master plan question, but I know we wanted to get through. One thing I will totally recommend is if you know what plants are seasonally appropriate for your area, put together, I call it my veggie vote. And I tell kids that Miss Noel just likes alliteration. These are not all vegetables. And so they know what veggie vote means, but I put together 6 things that would be great to plant for spring and 6 things that would be great to plant in fall. And I ask every single classroom to vote, and I calculate all their votes, and I put the top 2 in the garden. So it's kind of a really fun way for them to feel ownership over the plan, your planting plan, your master plan each year. Um, and for them to just practice voting and that process and how important that is, and honoring if something is what the majority of kids want to do, and but that also honoring themselves if what they want to do is not what the majority of their classroom is doing, to still raise their hand and vote for the one they like the best, has been a really fun part of the planning process. Yeah.
No questions out there? No comments out there for our beautiful gardeners? Maria asks, do any of you use rain barrels? If you do, which kind would you recommend that's affordable and durable?
I don't personally, but I do know our partner has some other gardens that she runs, and I'm gonna put her Instagram in there, and like you could also message her directly, and she like posts stuff about gardening and what to do all the time. So I'm just putting her down as a resource.
Thank you.
We don't use any rain barrels currently on any of our school campuses, but I have worked at school campus gardens in the past who have rain barrels, which is really wonderful resource if you can get your hands on it. And I know those were put in place by a local organization that brings rain barrels to campuses. This one was Tap the Sky. They're, I believe, a Bay Area based group. I'm not sure if they're still around, but I would say like look out into your network to see if there's any orgs that actually can help you make that happen.
Well, I have to say that I learned so much from all of you today. Thank you very much for sharing this incredible work. One of the things that struck me that you said, Sarah, I think you said it, is this notion of acceptance, that things don't always go as we plan, they go as they go. And that lesson for all of us is really important, to see things as they are and move from there, adapt from there. Are there any final comments you would like to make about gardening and the impact it has on the young people in the world? No pressure.
I think for me, I would just say, like, as you think about gardening, the idea of co-construction with your learners, you just described the vegetable voting, I think is the word you use. Like, there's nothing more powerful, like to decide, design, and then to build the stuff together, and then to be able to eat it. Like, that's life right there. So, uh, offer however you can think about co-constructing and allowing them to lead. That's critical.
All right, my friends, just let me share with all of you that we have Temescal and How Kids Learns has put out a briefing paper about gardening in after-school programs. And also on our How Kids Learn YouTube channel, all of the webinars are posted. Oh, Charlie, I've got you spotlighted there. All of the webinars are posted. You will receive a link to this webinar as soon as we have it, as well as all of the slide decks from today. I think that's what we've got. Sarah has just posted the watershed project to do rainwater catchment. How fabulous, which for us in California right now, it's a good thing to have. It's been pretty rainy. I appreciate you all. Thank you so much for doing the work that you do. And all of you out there, thanks for joining us. Have a great day.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.